Hi, everybody. Today I will speak with Rodrigo Sigal about his multimedia piece called Vida Lunar. Hi, Rodrigo.
Hello, Sandris, great to be with you, and thanks very much for inviting me.
And can you give some context information of the piece? Who commissioned, when it was written?
Well, Vida Lunar is, or Lunar Life in English. It's a piece I in 1997, at the end of 97, I started a project with a flute player in Mexico to create flute and computer pieces. And then at the time I was doing my PhD in London, in the UK. And then when I was done with that, I moved and I started living in Chile, in South America. And I was working at the university and everything. And there I met a very good friend now, I mean, many years later, called Alejandro Lavanderos, who is an amazing flute player. So at the time I was working with both are called Alejandro, both flute players are called Alejandro. So I started working with these two Alejandros in different projects. And Alejandro got an amazing, very high quality Alejandro Lavanderos in Chile, a bass flute. So I was so intrigued with the flute, about the quality of the harmonics and everything. And then he got a grant and commissioned me this piece for bass flute and computer. So I worked with him, did the piece, and then he performed the piece, recorded the piece and everything. But since then, I just kept the piece as a very active thing, because I started with the other Alejandro in Mexico, this project called Luminico, and started working in pieces and live performances, in multimedia performances of computer, multi-channel setups, video, and everything. So we took this piece and did a new version that includes, of course, computer, 8-channel setups, a little bit of sometimes live electronics, and also, of course, the flute part, and also video. So the version we are sharing today with your audience is the video version performed by Alejandro Square, but it was commissioned in 2002 by Alejandro Lavanderos in Chile.
Got it. Got it. And what is central message of the piece?
Well, the piece being part of this Luminico show has a specific idea of what the show, how it was going to work in the full show, which is a 1 hour long flute and computer performance that has many different pieces by me and other composers. So at the time I was doing this show had like 40 minutes of my music and 20 minutes of somebody else's music. So Vida Lunar is, in specific or whatever, the idea was that it was going to be like it's like the main part of the first half of the concert, where you move into very low frequencies, working with the bass flute, because we have contrasting flutes playing with bass flute, double bass flute, and even a counterbass flute, which is three octaves lower, and it's a huge flute. So we were working through the registers of the flute all the way to the piccolo. So Vida Lunar had this idea of the videos, and this idea of all the images that the video is working with, which are processes from movies and TV and commercial stuff, which are things from the earth, that together with the flute generating these filters, for me they looked like things from outer space, or from not of this world, although they are things from this world. So the whole point of the flute was to connect this idea of the music leaving earth and going into a more abstract world.
Yes, yes. And what about a sensorial experience? What kind of sensorial experience you want to create it, right, for audience?
That's a nice question, because at the end of the day, that's, in my sense, that's the most important thing. All the other, it's conceptual, and it doesn't really matters that much. The piece starts in full black darkness, and there's no video for a couple of minutes. So the this low ambient of the flute and the coordination with the computer makes, in my sense, in sense of Sensorial, a very calm and let's say, yeah, like slow process which for the audience, my idea was that it, coming from a very fast piece, is like a contrast. And then when the video starts, that it's in the middle of the piece, I mean, people don't even know there's video for the piece, and suddenly in minute 4 or whatever, all the light comes on. So it still is very slow, but the fact that you have colors and movement, it's a contrasting thing without going with fast music. So I really like that idea, like a visual counterpart that behaves differently, but then after a couple of minutes they all go together because you are already, you know that the video is there and everything starts going together. So that's the activity I liked.
And what was the process of composing, right? This piece, how you started?
Well, that piece is because I had 4 or at least 4 or 5 already flute pieces, and my field of working that I really like, and at the time even more, it's mixed pieces, chamber instruments, acoustic one instrument pieces with computer. So the process is more or less similar to the other pieces I did at the time, which is generating a couple of ideas for the flute in a score, then the performer reading them in a studio and helping them to generate the sources. So not reading the piece, but reading the ideas that I feel are more important. Then I record everything like sound sources. Then I go into the composition studio and start generating like a set of sounds, families of sounds. So I create 3 different layers, which is of course the normal flute, which reads the score. Then the recorded flute, that it's actually on the computer, but with little transformation, so people can actually recognize the flute very easily, like the instrument, but coming from the speakers. And then the computer part, which is more abstract. So this recorded flute helps to connect both worlds. So you still have the computer, but playing flute very easily to understand. So that's more or less the concept, and that's something I even wrote a couple of articles about, that I called a meta instrument or a meta flute, which means conceptually it's a piece for flute, bass flute, that actually generates everything, including the computer sounds or the video. Everything comes from the gestures from the performer. So the composition process was just going back and forth, recording in the studio sounds that then go to the computer and then write flute again.
Yes. And what about video? When it came, right? So it was on the last stage, or at the beginning? How was this created?
Well, in this particular piece came later because I did the piece without video at the beginning, as I was saying. So this was already done. I actually thought about the video concept and everything after the piece. This was a piece for flute and computer. But then with the Luminico process, I really had this idea with the other Alejandro about the possibility of just starting from darkness and then the colors. So I worked on the video with a friend of mine from Colombia, Ricardo Giraldo, who it's a graphic designer and musician. So, but the piece was already there, so I was not changing the music, so I had to work with the video like that. But this is the only piece I've done like that. All my other pieces with video, no, sorry, there are 2, but all of the other pieces, I work together, everything at the same time and generate everything. But this is a piece I did for flute, computer, and a couple of, like maybe 4 years later, I did the video.
Yes, got it. And what kind of software you used in that piece?
Well, this Vida Lunar piece has a couple of plugins. I'm trying to remember because it's an old piece. I don't have it here, but at the moment I was working mainly with a couple of well, I had a couple of Max patches that I used to work with at the time, which helped me to generate some movement, and a couple of plugins from GRM in France, which I like a lot. The GRM tools, which are very famous now, and they have many packages. And then I also do sometimes a couple of live electronics, in the sense that when I get the recordings from the flute player, I just put the computer to play them back, and I start with my live electronic setup to improvise. like if there were someone performing, and then I'm recording that. And when something works, I write it down, and then I go back and work with it a little bit more. And then I put everything together into a digital performer, which is my DAW where I work. I've been working on that forever. And then I write the score in Finale.
And video? And with what kind of software video was created?
The video was everything done with Final Cut Pro.
Yeah. And what was like compositional principles for sounds, right?
Well, something that at the time was very interesting for me was this idea of generating the connection as having one piece, a piece that doesn't sound like for flute and computer. Yes. But I really wanted to have a piece that sounded for a very powerful flute, like a all-powerful flute that can do any kind of sounds, not only flute timbres. So every single sound and gesture was planned like that. Like what was going to happen with the keys, keystrokes, and everything that actually generated some air, but also some air coming from the speakers. That was the concept of the sound.
Yes, got it. And how was your cooperation with performer?
Well, with Alejandro in Chile, as I was saying, I used to send him the music. He recorded the sounds, and I got back into the studio. We did that 3 or 4 times. And then afterward, when the piece was ready and already premiered and everything, and I started the video version, the one we are talking about today, I went into the studio with the other flute player and started showing him the video. So we actually worked more on how the feeling and the performance of the flute had to change to integrate with the video, because the piece was already written without video. So we worked more on to perform it live with video. We needed to change a little bit of the dynamics and a little bit of the actual physical performance to connect with the video. So we worked on that when we did the video, like in 2006 or whatever.
And what was the biggest changes, right? This is interesting because the biggest changes, as I understand, right? What are you saying? Is that when you added this video, there should be some changes in the sound as well, and in a way how it's performed, right?
Yeah, the whole point of my Luminico multimedia project is to explore chamber music, mixed chamber music, and how you have to adapt it to be able to perform live with video and other media to generate a concert that it's really appealing and entertaining. So that was an example, one of the examples that we work with, which is the idea that people have to get the feeling that the flute player is actually controlling this abstract world, that the video is moving at the speed of the performer, that the timbre and the space, everything is controlled by the flute player, not the guy on the side of the stage. It's actually the flute player. So most of my music, especially for flute, tries to work on a way that it's very simple to play. He knows the music by heart, no stand or no music stand, but the actual movements and physical gestures have to be connected with what you see and what you hear. So there's a lot of performance into it, but then the piece it's easy, it's pre-recorded. There's nothing live going on.
Yes. And tell me about the gestures, or let's say this dramaturgical part of performer, right? How it was, okay, what was intended, what kind of gestures was used, and why?
In this piece in particular, was everything, as I was saying, comes from this idea of starting with the low register, and the harmonics of the pitches I chose were linked to the effects and the transformation of the video.
Yes.
So some notes have are more dissonant, and they have like more roughness, so the video has more roughness. It's very literal in that sense. But then there are moments where some pitches generate some colors, and the speed there are places where the flute, when it goes very high, then the video goes backwards. So it's like the pitch, it's actually what's moving forward the video. from the low pitches. When you go into high pitches, it starts going back. So it's more or less like generating a link between the pitches, high pitches, and the playback of the video.
Got it. Got it. And can you imagine this piece without video? Because you imagine, right? It's already was written, right? But
yeah, that's the concept. You didn't know that at the beginning, but let me tell you something. This piece, it's that the reason I chose this piece to share with you and your audience is not only that it's a piece that started without video, then became a multimedia piece, but then I found that it's a piece that generated me a lot of ideas about how a piece can actually be with you for a very long time, and although it's still the same piece, something completely different has been happening since then. So the piece was the bass, flute, and computer. Then the whole video thing came. Then we started performing the piece. Then I started having other performers. Then I did adaptations of the same piece for other low instruments like cello, for example, and then the cello with video. So it's a piece that allowed me to actually understand what I want to explore as a multimedia intermedia artist, like having information from the sound and finding ways to connect it to the visual counterpart, and then from the video going back to a different instrument, which is a cello, and then from the cello understanding how to adapt that to the flute. So the whole like very dynamic idea of the piece for the past 20 years has been very revealing for me, because I learned a lot of things that I'm using for other works. So that's why I consider this piece a very important piece in my catalog, because I learn a lot from the piece every time, and it changes. It's not like a very old piece that they keep performing. It's a different piece almost every 5 years.
yes. And can you say, right? Because you say you learn a lot, right? What was, let's say, the most key learnings, right, for you from
Well,
this?
the main thing is this idea that the piece, it's not a set thing as I thought before. It's not like when you're finished, you just have more performances, better and bad performances forever. It's like you can actually use the same music to do different things, like a more multimedia approach. It's a piece that actually taught me more about multimedia, more about being able to having a basic music, and then not only creating video and other instruments, but also exploring how to perform the piece live throughout 20 years of working, and then sometimes having 8 channels, and sometimes having 3 screens, sometimes doing it in a planetarium. So it's a very flexible piece that I've done in many different situations with many different levels of technology, and always learning how to connect these gestures that I was talking about through different mediums. So that's something that it's very has been great for me in terms of learning, because I have to adapt not the music, not the sounds, but the connection of the gestures from the music, from the flute to the video, to the computer, to the dome of the planetarium or whatever.
Okay, got it. And the last question: what would be your advice to composers who have never created a multimedia piece but would like to start one?
That's interesting. Well, it's difficult to find people who are not already understanding multimedia as an artistic process, because multimedia at the end of the day is using data from other medium in what you do. So what I would recommend, of course, is nowadays we have technology that it's even really powerful personal computers that can do real-time video and stuff like that, which are, I mean, real-time audio, it's been available for maybe 10 years, but real-time video, it's very new. So there's a lot to explore, and there's access to these tools which are much easier. So I would say that just gather information and explore, but try to avoid doing exactly what the software allows you to do and wants you to do, which is just putting video and sound and then moving sliders to the left and right, and just finding something as it was you who is doing it. So I would rather try to, like I do with my students, tell them, think about an idea and then learn how to solve it with the software. That allows you to learn not only the artistic thing but the technical skills. If you don't like it, then you change that. But don't go from only experimentation, which is nice and good. But if you always go from nothing and experimenting to find something you like, you always end up with the same results. You also have to do the other way around. Think about what you want and find the technical skills to do it. So it's both ways. So that would be my advice or whatever.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for this interview.
Thanks very much. I hope you like the piece, and I'm always welcome to comments and everything on your webpage or my webpage or whatever.